Most men of the 13th century feared God, but those who sailed the English Channel feared only one man, a renegade cleric who traded his soul for the sea. He was a master of black magic, a knight of the shadows, and the most successful pirate of the Middle Ages. This is the legend of Eustace the Monk.
To understand the man, we must first look to the shadows of his youth. Born as Eustace Busquet around the year 1170, he was the son of a minor nobleman in the county of Boulogne. In a world governed by the strict hierarchies of feudalism and the iron grip of the church, Eustace was expected to follow a path of quiet devotion. He entered the Benedictine monastery of Saint Samer near Boulogne, taking the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But the soul of Eustace was never quiet.
Legend tells us that before he ever took the habit, he traveled to Toledo in Spain. In the medieval imagination, Toledo was a city of forbidden knowledge, a place where the dark arts were whispered in hidden libraries. It was here, the stories claim, that Eustace studied necromancy and learned to manipulate the very fabric of reality. Whether he truly mastered the occult or was simply a man of extraordinary intellect, this reputation for supernatural power would become his greatest weapon. He returned to the monastery not as a humble servant of God, but as a man who knew how to make the wind howl and the eyes of his enemies deceive them.
His life of prayer was shattered not by a crisis of faith, but by a blood feud. His father, Baudouin Bousquet, was murdered, and the local authority, Count Renaud de Damartin, refused to grant Eustace justice. In fact, Renaud accused Eustace of financial mismanagement of the monastery's lands. This was the spark that set the world on fire. In an act of open defiance, Eustace cast off his monk's robes, abandoned his vows, and declared a private war against the Count. He became an outlaw, a ghost in the forests of Boulogne.
The stories of this period read like a dark reflection of Robin Hood. Eustace was a master of disguise and psychological warfare. One day he would appear as a charcoal burner, the next as a wandering minstrel, or even a leper. He didn't just want to kill the Count's men, he wanted to humiliate them. He would lure the Count's knights into traps, strip them of their dignity, and vanish back into the trees before the alarm could be raised. But the forest was too small for a man of his ambition. The sea was calling.
By 1205, Eustace had moved his operations from the woods to the waves. He realized that the English Channel was the throat of the world's commerce, and he intended to wrap his hands around it. He entered the service of King John of England, the infamous John Lackland. John was a king desperate for allies, embroiled in losing battles for his continental lands. In Eustace, he found a naval commander who didn't play by the rules of chivalry.
Eustace was granted a fleet and a base of operations on the Channel Islands, specifically Sark. From this jagged, rocky fortress, he became the terror of the seas. He wasn't just a pirate, he was an admiral of the dispossessed. Under his command, the English Channel became a graveyard. He seized merchant cogs, ransomed noblemen, and established a maritime empire that operated outside the laws of any kingdom. It was during this time that his legend grew to mythic proportions. Sailors whispered that Eustace could make his ships invisible to the naked eye, or that he could conjure a fog so thick that his enemies would sail their ships straight into the cliffs while he watched from the sunlight.
His relationship with King John was a marriage of convenience, and like all such marriages, it was doomed to end in violence. By 1212, Eustace had become too powerful and too independent. He began raiding the English coast as often as he raided the French. When King John finally declared him an outlaw and seized his English properties, Eustace didn't plea. He simply changed masters. He offered his services to the French crown, joining Prince Louis of France in his ambitious bid to invade England and seize the throne.
The pirate monk now turned his fury against the very kingdom that had once sheltered him. He became the primary transport for the French invasion forces, ferrying thousands of knights across the narrow sea. To the English, he was no longer just a pirate, he was a traitor and a demon. He dominated the waters, cutting off supply lines and making the crossing a journey of pure terror. For 5 years, he held the channel in a literal death grip. The climax of this epic life came in 1217 at the Battle of Sandwich. This was the moment the legend met its end. Prince Louis was struggling in his campaign on land and desperately needed reinforcements and supplies from France. A massive fleet was assembled, and Eustace was placed in command of the lead ship, a vessel packed with treasure and high-ranking officials. Opposing him was an English fleet commanded by Hubert de Burgh. The English were outnumbered, but they had learned from years of suffering at Eustace's hands. They knew they couldn't outfight him in a traditional boarding action, and they knew they couldn't outmaneuver a man who supposedly commanded the winds. So they used his own ingenuity against him.
As the two fleets drew close, the English positioned themselves upwind of the French. In a move of calculated brutality, they began hurling pots of crushed quicklime onto the French decks. The wind carried the caustic powder directly into the eyes of Eustace's sailors, blinding them instantly. In the chaos that followed, the English grappled the French ships. The battle became a slaughter.
Eustace's great ship was surrounded. He was found hiding in the bilge, hoping perhaps that one last disguise or one last spell could save him. When he was dragged onto the deck, he offered a king's ransom for his life, 30,000 marks, a sum that could build a cathedral. But for the English, money wasn't enough. They didn't want his gold, they wanted his head. To them, he was a sorcerer, a monk who had broken his holiest vows, and a pirate who had caused too much grief to be allowed to live.
On the deck of his own flagship, the man known as the pirate monk was executed. A common sailor named Stephen Crabbe performed the deed, severing Eustace's head with a single blow. His head was later fixed upon a pole and paraded through the towns of southern England, a grim trophy signifying that the demon of the Channel was finally dead.
The death of Eustace marked the end of the French attempt to conquer England, but it was the beginning of a literary legend. Shortly after his death, a French romance titled The Romance of Eustace the Monk was written. It blended historical facts with wild supernatural tales, ensuring that his name would be remembered long after his bones had turned to salt. He became a figure of folklore, a man who represented the blurred lines between the sacred and the profane, the law and the outlaw.
Eustace the Monk remains one of history's most enigmatic figures. He was a man who lived a dozen lives in one. He was a man of God who became a man of the sword, a scholar of the dark arts who became a master of the sea. His legacy is etched into the very waves of the English Channel, a reminder of an age when one man's ambition and vengeance could steer the course of empires. He was a monk, a sorcerer, an outlaw, and a king of pirates. But above all, he was a survivor who refused to be forgotten by history. Subscribe for more.